So we've unpacked everything from Rowan Betty's attic. We have an ewer from the early 20th century, art pottery from the 30s, these kitschy faux Wedgwood ice bucket and bar pitcher from the 50s, this miniature pinch-like Scotch bottle, but it's I think it was probably a perfume bottle, a little creamer, a 50s painted and gilded glass piece, some grandmothery piece from, again, early 20th century, maybe late 19th. This is probably something from the 50s, maybe from your grandmother. Majolica, so it's a bunch of beets. This is definitely grandmother era. My grandmother had something like this in ruby glass. And a typical production glass, florist piece of glass where it's heavy. What I liked about this is it had a textured kind of argyle pattern on the side. So we're going to start working with this. So now we're going to design a bunch of different vases with the flowers in your kit. So we're going to start with this production glass florist container and sunflowers. And then because of this kind of chevron-like pattern, I think that the Phragmite grass will echo that pattern in the side of the container. So I'm going to add that to it. When you're collecting this, be aware that this tends to grow in marshy areas, and while it looks like it might be dry, when you go off, be sure that you're wearing closed-toed shoes and anticipate it might be boggy. I would hate to have you go out there and be surprised and have totally sodden shoes by the time you get out of that. Let's see. A couple of snaps. Do some snapdragons. Over this a little. It's always a good idea to start a little too long, because you can always adjust and make it shorter. It's hard to add the stem length back if it's gone. Also keep in mind things will keep moving, which is fine. You just need to keep checking back as you're working on your piece to be sure that everything is positioned where you want it. We have a few stems of Buchlorum. Let's see. A few of the green tea roses. Work on triangles. So we have a triangle from the snapdragons, also from the sunflowers. So you're working again with triangles with these roses. This is an all-around arrangement. You could make it one-sided. It really depends on where you're planning to put your flower arrangement. We'll add a little bit of gold thread cypress to this, and we'll be finished. So once again, this is something that I found in my foundation planting at the studio. You might find something similar to this in your own foundation planting if you own a house. Or you might use something like fern that you find on a walk in the woods or by the roadside. Okay. Keep in mind also that the roses are going to increase to about this big, and the sunflowers, when they open, will probably be 4 inches, maybe 5 inches across. So this will continue to develop and open up and show more and more color. Next, we're going to use this ewer. And I think because of the drama of the spout, I'm going to mimic it on the other side with the the snapdragons. We'll keep it also fairly tall. We'll adjust the positioning of that once I've got more material in it. Looking at the design on the container, it looks like the curcuma would be interesting to include in here as well. I'm going to be mostly working in multiples of 2. I think also because it is a pitcher or spouted piece, I'm going to use some of this crazy vine I found out behind my studio. See if we can make this work. In the back there. Okay. I think we're going to make this one-sided, so that's why I'm moving this on the other side. This vine mostly was showing the back of the leaves on this side, so we've moved it around so you can enjoy the front. Let's add another piece of cypress. One last piece here in the spout, or near the spout. And I think we're good to go with that. So we'll put that over here. Okay. Let's try this one. This, because it's got a lot of filigree in the gold design, I think we're going to use some bupleurum to kind of mimic that. Save the small laterals that you've taken off, put them aside, because we've got all these miniature vases ahead of us that we can use those pieces in. So basically with this, I'm starting to put together a collar for the vase. And it's also a matrix of kind of forked branches that will hold the other flowers in place as we add more material. These little side shoots we can also insert. Don't need to waste anything. Okay. Because it's kind of traditional, let's use Lisianthus. The wiry stems have a certain delicacy, which I think complements the vase and this approach with the Buchlorum. Also like the greenish ivory base of the flowers. And I think I'm going to keep this pretty simple. It'll just be this green and pink combination. The gold is a nice accent that's actually picked up by the golden tiny blooms in the Buchlorum. It'll look a little bit old-fashioned, which I think makes sense with the container. Kind of sweet. Build up a little bit of height. Add one more piece of Buchlorum in the center. Stabilize it just a little bit more. A little bit in the foreground. With some of the foliage on the Buchlorum, it looks like a disc of green. In this case, I've just edited a little bit because the disc covered one of the Lisianthus. This is more or less a 3/4 round piece. I'm considering this the back. I wasn't keen on the gold medallion, so I'm putting that toward the back when I put it in place in a home somewhere. Makes it a little bit more modern. So that's that piece. Now, this is Majolica. And Majolica is just a ceramic art that is practiced in Italy and Spain, Portugal. Sometimes it's also referred to as fansware. You'll find a variation of this in France as well. Because this seems to have a sort of vegetal quality like maybe beans or some other vegetable. I'm going to use this and cut it up in a few places. You see how the the seed pod, or what looks like beans, is right above a pair of leaves. So if you cut right there, it's a nice unit. Okay? So this one long stem can end up giving you a multitude of stems to work with. One of the things I'm going to do is make sure the water is filled to the top, because the stems will be a little shorter. And what's nice again is it's spilling over, following the line of the pitcher, the spout. And what I've discovered here is a broken piece of the vine that is wrapped around this piece. So I want to make sure I take this out, because suddenly part of the arrangement will be dying and it won't make any sense why. And here what we're seeing are the little flowers. This is really interesting to see. So these tiny little flowers made this bean or seed pod. Pretty cool. So we'll put this at the back, flare out on either side of the handle. I'm going to use the Cremones, which is this chrysanthemum. Since this is a little bit asymmetrical as a piece, I lowered this following the line of the spout. It's a deliberate choice. Add a little bit of this gold thread to highlight the green tips in the Cremone. I want to make sure that you put this below the flower head, so it kind of frames the bloom. I kind of like the simplicity of that, so I think we're going to put that aside for now. I might come back to it. I want to see how far we get. Okay, this is an art pottery vase, and I think we'll use the last two sunflowers. Make this asymmetrical. More gold thread cypress. You're probably getting the impression that I really do like this foliage, and you'd be right. When I first moved to my studio, my builder automatically installed some foundation planting, and I ended up with 20 of these shrubs, and I groaned when I first viewed it when it was finished and ready for me to move in, and I thought, I hate those. They always remind me of something that must be dying. They've now become my favorite foliage. I absolutely love this foliage. There's so little in nature that affords this opportunity of this really gorgeous spring green and yellow, the same stem. Take some of the Veronica. I'm trying to emphasize the long lines of almost what are a pair of handles in the design of the vase. Kind of by the nature of the design of this vase, it really reads as a one-sided container. So I'm approaching it that way. Though I will design it, really designing it as two sides rather than all around. Now I'm wondering about my decision about going asymmetrical when this is so formal in its symmetry. So I think I'm actually going to adjust this. Kind of go with the formality that's inherent in the design of this, lowering these a little bit. Fourth rose. And I've added the Veronica to highlight the lavender that's edging the roses. Okay. And we've got a couple more cremones I'm going to put in here. Looked a little bit light. Oh, great. This is what happens when the edges of the stems catch what you're pulling out, and suddenly your whole arrangement jumps out. It's simple enough to put it back together. This is a very sweet vase. And it's a little bit modern given the period of this piece being in the 50s. So I think we'll use the curcuma. This period was fascinated, particularly in the United States, by exotic tropical places. So honeymoons in Tahiti and Florida and Hawaii were on everybody's agenda back in the late 50s. And this is when we first started seeing these really gorgeous exotic blooms. Let's see. I think I want to use a little bit of the Phragmites because of the color of the container as well. So let's just take a look and see if that works. Here what I'm going to want to do is to keep them relatively short. I can cut up the stems here in segments and then insert them to get some mileage out of the grass itself. It lends a kind of tropical air, kind of reinforcing this tropical feeling of the curcuma. I'm thinking when I look at this of the suggestion of palm leaves, actually, but it's done with grass. And then having the sort of wiry bupleurum stems and this little flicker of gold in here relates to the little hints of gold in the applied stripes on this container. All right. Now we've got a bunch of little things here. And this, maybe we'll try this first. So this was an ice bucket. A riff on Wedgwood. I load this with last of the foliage here. I'm actually not sure that I want that because it's not really the right color. Let's see if this sagey green, which really is the color of the container, will work. A lot of the fun with these kits is you can play around with it and try a bunch of different things with the material you've brought in, combined with what the vase is suggesting as you go along. And the great thing is no one's watching. You can just do it, pull it out if you don't like it, and try it again. And what I'm using here, I didn't explain this, there's a frog inside this container because it's very broad, and if I was just to put these in loosely, they would kind of jump out of the container. So This is a series of like hairpins or bobby pins that are held in a metal base. And the base is weighted so that it stays in place, which is perfect to hold these. So we're ending up creating a kind of interesting frame or again a collar to arrange the blooms in. As the leaves have gotten longer, I've made the stems I'm inserting shorter to try to make sure that it doesn't overwhelm the container. So I think we're going to go a little wacky and use these cool Crispidia. And I'm thinking about kind of solar system and Sputnik at the time. So these remind me of sort of fun, maybe outer space or cartoony objects flying around. Bright color. Picks up on a gold rim in a playful way. Again, these are called Crispidia, and they originally were cultivated or found actually in Australia. Didn't exist anywhere else in the world. First time I saw them was at the Olympics, when the Olympic teams, I think back in the mid-60s, were presenting bouquets to winners, or medal winners. And these and kangaroo paws and a number of other interesting flowers were in the mix. I had no idea what they were. Came to find out when I started getting involved in this business that they were called Crispidia. Some people also call them billy balls for some reason. I don't know why, but it's kind of interesting. So the one thing I'm going to want to do when I'm finished is when I look into the ice bowl, I'm seeing the cuts from the sections of the grass. So I'm going to want to put something in to distract. I'm going to want to save this, and let's try it. I'm not sure this is the right solution. But if I keep it short, it may work. Yes, this is doing the trick. Keeping it low because I don't want to obscure the lines of this sort of sunburst or starburst that we've made with the grass. Again, that 50s motif of sunburst, starburst, anything that's sort of spacey is also typical in this era. Funny combination of Roman civilization and outer space. but we were starting jet travel and talk of going to the moon, doing the first flight around the Earth back in the early 60s. So it's not out of the question in terms of what was socially on everyone's mind at that time, at least in American history, but I think this was also true in Europe. Okay, so we have a few little things left, which we're going to put in these little bud vases, a little water. So there's a little water in there. So we'll do this. This is a sweet little piece. Take the Veronica. It's so tiny. Just get it in. A little lateral foliage, it does the trick. It really doesn't need anything else. We have a rose and bupleurum and the Lizzie. So again, this little pinch bottle, a very tiny neck. So we'll use a greenish Lisianthus. Here in the little mug, actually it's a creamer, but it keep looking at it as if it's a mug. We'll make a dense arrangement of the bupleurum. Notice the medallion here, and I'm looking at the medallion-like shape of the leaves on the bupleurum as an echo, design echo. Again, keeping it short so that it will support the single bloom that we're going to put in there. Just pack it in. I want to make sure that you're stripping anything that might be below the water line, always. Otherwise you advance, or you shorten, I should say, the life of your flower arrangement as it starts rotting. Water will rot these leaves. And it breeds bacteria that starts breaking down the stem, so they are unable to draw water up the stem. This is why you would typically every 3 days or so look at your arrangement, look at the water in the arrangement. If it's at all cloudy, you want to remove the arrangement, rinse the stems, recut them, wash the vase, and then fill the vase with fresh water and put the arrangement back in. Okay, so we have a nice tight bundle of bupleurum. And we're going to put this green tea rose in the center of it, kind of nestled in there. A little bit shorter. Sweet. Looks like this. And then we'll add the last few threads to the pinch bottle. Just what we can slip in. Yellow green complementing the yellow green tones of the Lisianthus bloom. So there you have it. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 arrangements with your full kit of flowers. This has been fun. Thank you very much. I hope you have a great time with your floral design kit.